In the year 1453, you find yourself in Constantinople, a city that has stood resilient for over 1,000 years. The city walls, which have defended against countless sieges, now tremble as the thunderous roar of Ottoman cannons fills the air. Just 3 days ago, your husband lost his life defending the very walls that once offered safety. His blood now stains the stones, a reminder of the protection they failed to provide. As Turkish soldiers break through your door, you clutch your infant daughter to your chest, realizing that the fate awaiting you will make your husband's death seem almost merciful. For the next 6 centuries, the Ottoman Empire would spread its dominion across 3 continents. From the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Yemen, the Ottomans are remembered for their architectural marvels, their brilliant military strategies, and their sultans whose decisions would echo through history. However, beyond the grandeur of their monuments and military conquests, lies a darker, more harrowing story, one that official history has worked hard to silence. It is the story of a systematic approach to conquest, one that weaponized the most intimate aspects of human life. Before we delve into this darker side of history, let's take a moment to reflect on the forgotten truth. If the notion of untold histories interests you, please consider subscribing and share where you're tuning in from in the comments. Your engagement truly helps us shed light on stories that are often buried. Now, let's uncover the grim reality of what happened when Ottoman forces claimed victory. When the Ottoman forces breached enemy fortifications, a meticulously orchestrated series of events began to unfold, driven not by the urgency of military conquest, but by a cold, calculated system of exploitation. What followed was not chaos and mayhem of war, but a precise policy, repeated across every city they conquered. In the case of Constantinople, which fell on May 29, 1453, Sultan Mehmed's soldiers did not simply pillage and leave. Instead, they adhered to something chillingly bureaucratic, a practice known as the harvesting protocol. The Byzantine chroniclers of the time recount scenes straight out of a nightmare. Streets filled with anguished screams, families torn apart by violence. Yet, the Ottoman records describe these very same scenes as just another part of routine administration. The contrast between the two accounts is staggering. What was considered tragedy in one account was written as standard procedure in another. This harvesting protocol was coldly efficient. Adult men, aged 12 and older, were executed, not in the chaotic frenzy of battle, but in organized groups after surrender. This wasn't an act of killing to neutralize resistance. It was a premeditated act of total destruction. Boys as young as 6 were also executed, deemed potential threats of rebellion in the future. The empire had learned the hard way, no male survivors meant no potential for revenge. But the fate of the women and children was far more sinister. The Ottoman legal documents, still preserved in archives, outlined in shocking detail how conquered populations were to be divided. Women were at the center of this system, categorized and sorted like livestock in the heart of the cities left in ruins. Public squares became the stage for these transactions. The devastated remains of churches, town halls, and civic centers were the backdrop. This was no accident. The destruction of faith and community was tied directly to the dehumanization of the people. Families were forced to watch in horror as their loved ones were torn away from them. Mothers helplessly saw their daughters stripped of their futures, their lives reduced to mere numbers in the empire's grand design. The women who were considered most valuable were those between the ages of 14 and 25. Ottoman records from Constantinople's fall note the exact number of women in this age range, 4,200. These women were assigned numbers, given an estimated worth, and were integrated into the empire's sprawling machine. Next were women between the ages of 25 and 40. They were considered useful, not for pleasure, but for labor. They were to be used for household work, agricultural tasks, or menial labor. Though their prime years had passed, their bodies still had value to the empire. The third group consisted of women over 40. Their fate was far more brutal. These women were judged as unworthy of resources, their feeding and transportation deemed wasteful. They were executed almost immediately. Children were dealt with in their own specific manner. Boys under the age of 6 were absorbed into the Devshirme system, a program of cultural erasure where they would be converted, trained, and raised to serve the empire that had destroyed their families. Girls under the age of 12 entered what the Ottomans called formation programs. These were institutions designed to mold girls into specific roles, concubines, servants, or property within the imperial household. In an instant, childhood was erased, replaced by harsh conditioning that would strip away everything the girls had known. The brutality wasn't random. This was psychological warfare aimed at destroying the will to resist before it even had a chance to form. Imagine standing in that public square as soldiers ripped children from their mothers' arms. Infants wailed in desperation as their mothers collapsed, watching in horror as their daughters were dragged away. At times, the youngest children were killed outright, not out of necessity, but as a demonstration of power. Killing a baby in front of its mother sent a message far sharper than any sword. Resistance meant the extinction of your bloodline. Within 48 hours of the fall of Constantinople, approximately 50,000 people had been processed under this protocol. Among them, 12,000 women and girls were forcibly shipped to Ottoman cities like Bursa and Ankara, while 8,000 others were divided among soldiers as spoils. What makes these events even more chilling is the meticulous nature of the records. This was not barbarism carried out in the shadows. This was industrialized, bureaucratic violence. Ships' manifests were used to list human beings alongside goods like silk and spices. A typical entry might read, 20 bolts of Damascus silk, 40 pounds of pepper, 15 females, ages 16 to 20, excellent condition. No names. No humanity. Just items on a ledger. Markets in Istanbul, Bursa, and other cities had entire sections dedicated to the buying and selling of human beings, where prices fluctuated based on demand. A Greek or Serbian girl might fetch 20 to 30 silver coins. African women's prices were based on their origin and physical traits. While the Ottomans did not invent slavery, they certainly perfected and industrialized it. Capture, transport, and sale became standardized processes, executed with an efficiency that would rival any modern corporation. Success in the military was not just measured by territorial conquest, but by the number of captives one could deliver. Soldiers and commanders alike were rewarded for their harvest, further incentivizing the seizure of civilian populations. This system of conquest, rooted in fear and the exploitation of human beings, spread quickly throughout the regions. Entire villages surrendered without raising arms, terrified of the fate they knew awaited them. The Ottomans had weaponized fear, making their most powerful tool not their cannons, but the terror that accompanied their forces. For women destined for markets far away, the journey itself became another layer of torment. Ottoman ships, specifically designed to carry human cargo, were equipped with rudimentary facilities to keep captives alive for the weeks-long voyage. But while the women were kept alive, everything else was stripped away. Their clothes, their possessions, even their names were taken. They were reduced to numbers and crude garments that marked them as property. During transport, the mortality rate hovered around 15%. This was considered an acceptable loss. To the Ottoman administrators, the deaths of women were no more significant than the discarding of spoiled grain or damaged goods. The efficiency of the system was staggering. Women were not viewed as human beings, but as resources to be optimized, exploited, and discarded. The Ottoman system of exploitation did not end at conquest. It became institutionalized, codified, and normalized. Legal codes, preserved in Ottoman archives, reframed rape as marriage, slavery as a divine mandate, and the dehumanization of entire populations as an administrative task. Widowhood, for instance, was a process outlined by law. When a man fell in battle, his widow automatically became the property of the man who killed him. Legal claims had to be filed within 72 hours, with 3 witnesses. This was not folklore, but written law. Women were fought over in courtrooms as though they were livestock. Conversion centers were built across the empire to break captives into submission. These were not makeshift prisons, but meticulously designed institutions meant to crush the spirit of the captured. Women were subjected to public ceremonies designed to humiliate them, forcing them to renounce their former faiths and embrace Islam. If they resisted, they were punished, but never in a way that would diminish their value. Their worth lay in their compliance. The Ottomans perfected the art of psychological warfare. Captives were systematically broken down, their identities erased, and their will to resist crushed. And while the physical toll was devastating, it was the psychological devastation that was perhaps more destructive. These women were forced to forget who they were. They were transformed into tools of the empire, stripped of their humanity and their past. This system did not disappear when the Ottoman Empire began to weaken. Its legacy endured in the cultures that had been subjugated. Villages lived in fear of the next raid, the next levy, the next march of Ottoman troops. Families had to adapt, creating customs and rituals designed to protect women from capture. Entire societies restructured themselves around this existential threat. The Ottoman Empire, for all its glory and conquest, left a legacy of trauma. It didn't just reshape the political landscape, it shattered families, erased identities, and stripped entire generations of their humanity. And that legacy, recorded meticulously in the Ottoman archives, remains as a chilling reminder of the cost of unchecked power. When we admire the monumental domes of the Blue Mosque or study the brilliance of Ottoman military strategy, we must also remember the cost of that grandeur. Behind the empire's glory was a devastating system of human exploitation, one that shaped the lives of countless women and children, and continues to shape the memories of those who lived under its shadow. History isn't just about what we build, it's also about what we destroy.